And welcome back to the Urban Monk. Dr. Pedram Shojai here talking about multi-system breakdown. I've had a lot of health content come onto the show. We've talked about a lot of things. And the one thing I can say for sure is it's complicated, right? There are so many things happening right now with our environment, with our stress, with our food supply that cause so many issues from the microbiome to our hormones and everything. And so, this one size fits all answer for a single kind of lane is really not going to serve humanity. I mean, the world has become a lot more complicated, and our solutions need to look at things in much more of a stacked, layered way. So with me today is Dr. Aviva Romm, who she's got a great history because she was a midwife herbalist who then went to Yale and became a medical doctor and really got the training to validate what she was doing outside the system, now in the system, and really working to change the system because really the system is broken. So we're going to talk about her new book, The Adrenal Thyroid Revolution, which is awesome, and also just talk about why so many people don't feel well and how we need to look at it. So hey, welcome to the show.
Hey, so great to be here. I love how we can be at a distance but be in the same place. It's so incredible.
Totally. That's my thing. It's like having high-tech camping gear, right?
Yep.
Like you go, you enjoy nature, you enjoy the people you're with, and the tech makes it all possible. So, welcome. You are now in my California studio.
Thank you. Hey, everybody.
Yeah.
It's nice to be in California.
Yeah, exactly. Well, you know what? I'm sorry, but it's raining right now.
New York too.
Is it? Okay, so so fair. So I want to get a little bit into this history a bit more. What made you suddenly go, you know what, that's it, I'm going to medical school? That's a serious decision later in life.
Yes, so this is actually a really different path kind of story. So backstory, which kind of relates to the book, is that I grew up in New York in a housing project with a single mom, and was wicked smart as a kid, big vocabulary, science fair winner, spelling bee winner, and discovered that I could get out of my housing project by applying to college when I was 14. So I actually went off to college. I got in, went off to college at 15, planning to do pre-med. So this was already kind of like a pre-meditated med school adventure. And my first semester there, this was 1981. I'm kind of dating myself here, but 1981, all of a sudden I was learning about food politics and healthcare politics and, the big agricultural, chemical, military, industrial complex. And I said, wow, I don't want to really be part of that. What can I do to make changes? And so I went vegan. I bought Chinese slippers so I didn't have to wear leather anymore, and I decided to take my own healthcare into my hands. And the way I did that was deciding to study herbal medicine and midwifery. So at the ripe age of 15 and a half, I left college, apprenticed myself to a midwife, studied everything I could get my hands on herbal medicine, which back in 1981, nobody really knew what that was. So there were like 3 books on the market. And then crafted this whole life career out of being a midwife, an herbalist, kind of an environmental advocate, and had my own family. But at some point, I guess in my mid-30s, I realized that I was at a point in my own life where I could probably make more change by understanding the language of the system that I needed to change, and having the sort of power elite, if you will, that MD does actually put after your name in terms of making change. And Yale MD certainly opened a lot of doors, and it gave me an incredible foundational training in science. So it was really that desire to make change and saying, if I'm so far outside the system as this sort of alternative hippie home birth midwife, I can preach to the choir, but if I really want to have a big impact, I need to take that road. And so I did. And it has actually been a quite powerful tool for amplification of my voice and my message, where I can more easily be on CBS News or Dr. Oz, or, just have a larger reach. And at the same time was able to be instrumental at Yale in setting up an integrative medicine program there. It was the first program at Yale ever for the medical students. And I still write the curriculum for the medical residencies in pediatrics and adult medicine that are used in 150 different med schools. So to me, it was like a total weird but like calculated political move to go inside the system to change it.
Totally. You just Trojan Horsed all your health and hippie stuff into the establishment. Nice move.
That is so funny. That is exactly what I say, because I'll get up on a stage of 500 doctors, and then I'll just be like, yeah, I so look like this nice, gentle doctor chick in my little cute suit, but you have just invited a Trojan horse onto your stage.
Yeah, well, and that's what it took.
It did. And there are some big issues that are really facing us. I mean, if you think about antibiotic overuse, it's one thing to be a sort of hippie home birth herbal midwife and tell a mama that her child doesn't need an antibiotic for that ear infection when the pediatrician is saying, well, if you don't, your child's going to go deaf and die, which people really do tell parents this kind of stuff. And for me to say, that is just not what the evidence is. And actually, this is completely inappropriate. And 70% of all antibiotics prescribed in the United States are completely inappropriate. So to have that sort of science behind me and the authority, for me, I just want to use it as a sort of power tool for good.
So what's different now? I mean, okay, so you were doing your practice and then you went to medical school. Has it changed your worldview at all? Has it solidified and kind of amplified what you were doing then? Or did you go like, oh shit, I was really wrong here? Like, how are you different than the person that went in?
Yeah, so I think a number of things. One is that it really actually has solidified. A lot of people say to me, how have you changed from being a midwife and an herbalist to being a doc? Because that's a pretty different end of the spectrum in terms of philosophies and beliefs. But, I think that one of the biggest areas that patients in general, that human beings in general, when we go into the medical system, feel is lacking is that we're not being heard, right? We have these rushed 5 or 7 minute appointments. We get a prescription, but there's very little eye contact here. I know what my patients' children's names are. I had a patient last year. I was like, how's your dog that was sick? That kind of relational care that really is the heart of midwifery training that I brought in with me. And then as an herbalist, we really take a much more broad view. We don't just say, you have insulin resistance. It must be a problem with your pancreas. Let's just give you some medication to help your insulin levels. We think, okay, well, what is actually going on? What are the whole system perspectives that we need to look at that include environmental issues, food, lifestyle, stress, how we think, what our backgrounds are and what our thought processes are and how that impacts our decisions. What are our economics, all of that. And I think I was actually able to bring that into my medical environment and come out the other end with that, as well as a whole new set of tools. So it's really amplified what I was doing before, but also added to it because it's given me a whole set of research, epidemiology skills that have really allowed me to look at the medical literature. So when a new study comes out that says, statin drugs are the answer to everyone's cholesterol problem and all that stuff about diabetes isn't true, I know where to go and dig into whether it's the Cochrane report or PubMed and say, you know what, this looks like smoke and mirrors from a pharmaceutical company. And I don't want to impute ill motives to individual doctors because most of the doctors I know are really quite caring, compassionate, dedicated people who have spent anywhere from 10 to 16 years of their life getting their education very intentionally. But unfortunately, too often physicians are overstressed, overbusy, and unwittingly kind of become puppets or marionettes in a much bigger industry, which is a medical industry and a pharmaceutical industry that really does drive clinical decisions that happen with each patient. And so, I don't want to get Karen Silkwooded, but at the same time, there's enough evidence that shows that, for example, articles that are published in pharmaceutical journals are often created by the pharmaceutical companies. Sometimes the evidence is really cherry-picked to show what worked, but to completely exclude the harms and the hazards. And sometimes those articles are ghost written by doctors who are just called up and said, hey, we'll pay you $30,000 if you'll put your name on this article that's already been written to prove that our drug works. A lot of people think that that's kind of paranoid or propagandist talk. It's not. It's for real. And so we have to have people like me, and there are others like me, who are sort of, as you say, that Trojan horse, the people who are willing to say, you know what, the emperor actually isn't wearing clothes all the time, at least. Mm-hmm. And we have to, I think the other thing for me is it has really empowered me with the knowledge of my training and my education to be able to say to other people, you have to question authority. You can't just say yes. You can't just assume that mistakes aren't going to be made. You have to double check. Because there are mistakes, that are made in hospitals and doctors' offices. And so it's been a hugely empowering experience. And I feel like my goal is to do everything I can. Einstein said something like, if you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough. Mm-hmm. And my goal is to understand what is working and what's not working, and help the individual who doesn't necessarily have the time or the knowledge or the training to sort through the morass of information and misinformation so that folks can make really smart decisions for their healthcare.
It's hard. There's been the healthcare industry has been productized, right? And so there are these very known, very well profitable verticals where it's like, hey, listen, once they end up here, then they're on these meds for life. It's great, it's great business. And so no one's really looking at these multi-system approaches, because in some ways it's robbing people of customers. And so the good doctors of the world have learned to swim upstream and really let the healthcare business fall on its own face and be like, okay, look, I'm here to help you. I'm here. I'm committed to helping you. So now let's look at this. And so when you do that, and when you have one of these complicated things called a human in front of you, how is this adrenal thyroid axis, the connection between these glands, affecting our health? Because that really, this is new, and this is a newer understanding of health. And we've had, it was so compartmentalized for so many years.
Exactly.
that this is I think this is the future of medicine.
Yeah, I think you hit on it in so many points, Pedram, but let's pick up with the word compartmentalized. In medicine, we are trained in what are commonly called health silos. So you've got your gastroenterologist for GI, you've got your endocrinologist for hormones, you've got your psychiatrist for mind and mood, you've got your cardiologist for your heart, so on, obstetrician for your pregnancy, so on, and so forth and so on. And what we're taught in medicine is that your diagnosis starts the day you get your disease starts the day you get your diagnosis. So if you go to your doctor and you have high blood sugar and you're diagnosed with diabetes, your diabetes started right then, and you get sent to your endocrinologist for diabetes care. If you come in with if you come in with a heart disease, you come in with a heart attack. Okay, well, your heart disease started right then, and you're funneled off to the silo of cardiovascular care, where you have your heart doctor who cares for you. And a number of problems happen because of this. One is, and the big one, is that we're never looking at the why. And so we end up in exactly what you talked about, this sort of vertical of ad infinitum stuck on your medication, because we're basically taught that diseases are random, they're bad genetics, there's nothing we can really do about them, they're bad luck, or there's some bad habit that you have that landed you here. And without looking at the underlying or root causes, the things that connect, we never really get out of that sort of perpetual search for a quick cure. And that quick cure is never quick. You end up on it long term. You're always on your statin drug. You're always on your antidepressant. You're always on your antihypertensive or your anti-cholesterol drug. People don't usually ever come off of those because we're never taught that we can. We're kind of raised with this idea that our bodies are lemons, and eventually something's just going to go wrong, and then you fix it with a pill. What I have learned, and this really kind of comes from a field of science that is the most fascinating to me, it's called psychoneuroimmunology. And it's the field of science that, in a sense, basically says everything is connected. We know, for example, that on our nervous system cells, we have receptors for immune system cells. On our immune system cells, we have receptors for chemicals that come from our nervous system. It's a very fancy way of saying that there is proof, for example, that what's going on in our mind or emotions affects our immunity. What's going on in our immune systems affects our emotions. So if you have a lot of inflammation, you produce these chemicals, for example, that are exactly the same chemicals that you produce called cytokines right before you get the flu. So have you ever had that experience, like you feel kind of lousy for a few days, you're even feeling maybe a little down, a little tired, a little achy, you're like, what's wrong with me? And then on the third day, you have a fever or you have a flu, and you're like, that's what it is. There's nothing wrong with me. I was getting sick. Those same chemicals that we're producing when we're having just inflammation all the time from environmental toxins or foods that don't agree with us or just the standard American diet or stress can actually cause us to feel depressed or anxious. But what is our doctor saying? Oh no, depression and anxiety, that's just a problem with your moods or your coping ability or it's genetics. Here, take an antidepressant when we know that 30% of people with depression have inflammation that's actually causing the depression. So in another example is our gut, right? You mentioned the microbiome earlier. We know that things like that idea, like, oh, I feel it in my gut, or I have butterflies in my gut, or I can't stomach that, these expressions that we say that, kind of instinctively connect the emotions or what's going on in our feelings and the gut aren't just expressions. We know that as much information is going from our brain to our gut is as going from our gut to our brain. So if you have disruption in your microbiome because you're under a ton of stress or because you're not eating well or because you've had too many antibiotics over the course of your lifetime, those changes in what's growing in your gut, your microbiome, can be producing gases and chemicals and changes in your immune system that can make you feel depressed, anxious, irritable, moody, forgetful. And similarly, things going on in your brain can be impacting your gut. And every single system in our body is interconnected this way. So I started seeing these patterns not only in my patients, but observing what's going on in the world at large. I mean, articles have now been written about this epidemic of overwhelm that so many of us are under, how fatigue is rampant, but not just that, gut problems, IBS, autoimmune disease, anxiety, depression, cognitive problems, the list goes on and on and on. And what's fascinating is when we break it down, we can start to look at these root causes. And one of sort of the mother of all root causes that I turned up in my psychoneuroimmunology research over the past 12 years now is this adrenal stress axis. It starts in the brain, and it works its way from these two little organs or two little parts of our brain called the amygdala into what's called the HPA axis. It's the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. Two glands in the brain and one that sits on top of each little kidney. And the really cool thing is that we have this hormone that we produce called cortisol, and we think of it as a stress hormone. But what is amazing is that cortisol is like the conductor of an orchestra. And what the orchestra is literally every single cell in your body. Every single cell is primed to have its own rhythm, like its own time of day that it's doing certain functions. And it listens to cortisol, which is connecting your brain and every cell in your body as to what rhythm it should be in. And what's the hormone that gets disrupted when we're either under stress or just sort of living out of harmony with our own authentic rhythm or our own authentic self, or when we're under stressors that are coming from the environment. And you mentioned a number of these: food intolerance or food challenges, environmental toxins when you first were introducing me and introducing this topic, and all of those compound to disrupt this system. And really what's happening is the human being has this incredible capacity to adapt. And the whole system that controls our ability to adapt is that hypothalamic pituitary adrenal system. It allows you to adapt to stressors. But our 24/7 lifestyles and the 80,000 chemicals that are in our environment and the 20 rounds of antibiotics that we get by the time we're 18 years old that impact our gut and the toxins in our foods and the lack of nutrients that we're getting, and the lack of sleep that we're getting, on, has created a gap between our evolutionary ability to adapt and what we're being forced to adapt to.
Yep.
And the book and what I do in my medical practice is really helping people kind of return to a rhythm that allows that body's natural ability to heal and adapt to resurface.
So, I mean, God forbid you suggest slowing down or de-stressing. I mean, that sounds horrible. I want to keep the shitty life that I have and just give me something to fix it is really the problem. So when we look at, there's a number of things in there. Cortisol, everyone's kind of considering cortisol like this bad guy. Like, I think cortisol, stores belly fat, therefore it's bad. And so the kind of underlying understanding of what this symphony and this orchestra are about is a much richer read into what's actually going on here, because I think the health media tends to also compartmentalize and be like, give me a buzzword, coconut oil, that's what we're talking about this year. And so that, I would love to tease that out a little bit more. And for me personally, I love this idea of the kind of time rhythm and the biorhythm of the body being able to be influenced by this. Because what we see as stress to me is also, time pollution and time compression, and not understanding when to slow the hell down.
Exactly. You nailed it. I mean, we got to write the next book together, or do like some, we got to take this on the road. Cortisol in my book, I call it your best frenemy. And I have reframed calling cortisol a stress hormone and started just calling it a survival hormone. First of all, it's the only hormone in your body that if you stopped producing, you would die, right? You can not produce thyroid hormone very much and you'll function, you'll feel awful. You could kind of stop producing testosterone for the most part, and you won't have really much sex drive and you won't feel very energetic. But you just stop producing enough cortisol and your blood pressure goes away, your immune system goes away. So I think of it as a survival hormone. And, I really want to help us all think of our bodies as our best messengers and our best friends. Not in some weird, corny way. I know it sounds kind of corny when I say it, but your body and your brain are here to help you survive and thrive. But what happens is when we push our compensatory mechanisms too far, we can't compensate anymore. And, I'm a really driven person. I went to med school with 4 kids, 3 teenage daughters, ran a 1,200-member nonprofit that I brought up to a 2,000-member nonprofit, wrote a textbook, and started what is now a 7-figure business while I was in med school at Yale. So I'm a freaking maniac. But the secret to it is one, learning how to love your stress, right? Learning how to use stress as something that helps you thrive. Because cortisol, the influence of a small amount of cortisol and the influence of a small amount of adrenaline makes you feel excited, focused, energized, happy to be alive, pushes you toward a little bit of risk-taking. And it really is, it's tremendous. It's that feeling we get when we're a kid and we know we're going to the circus that day. It's that anticipation, excitement, joie de vivre. What happens is when we start producing too much of a good thing, because we're not giving ourselves what I call permission to pause, right? It's about adapting. So it's about pushing and stopping. And, high performance athletes know this, right? I don't think Michael Jordan or Michael Phelps or the Williamses go out on the court minute after minute after minute. They know that they have to train, heal, and rest. Train, heal, and rest. Partly because cortisol is produced a lot in high performance athletes, and it's a wear and tear hormone. So the secret to me of like longevity, high performance, really living your life to your fullest in this day and time, and heck, stress is not going away. Like, we're not going to dial back to some caveman time where, the fire goes out at 7:00 and we all go to sleep till the light comes up again in the morning. That's not going to happen. So how do we learn to live with it? And to me, it's knowing how to contract and expand, push and rest, and really staying dialed into 2 things. How are we feeling? Like, really checking in with our bodies. How am I actually feeling? So many people get so busy, they don't actually feel how they feel. And then the other thing is dialing that bigger rhythm, dialing into that bigger circadian rhythm that we mentioned. So the circadian rhythm is a 24-hour cycle, and our hormones, circadian means around the day, so circa diem, and our hormonal response is primed to cycle around that 24-hour rhythm, so that primitively we weren't hungry and needing to go to the bathroom or having the desire to hunt in the middle of the night. We were sleeping when it was dark, but then when daylight came, we were primed to do the things that we need to do in the day. And it's really cool when you start to get into the very focused science of it. So you have different immune system activation at night because you're sleeping. You're not likely to go shake a bunch of people's hands or encounter a bunch of dangers during the nighttime that are going to expose you to viruses and bacteria and parasites. So during the night, you have a whole immune system activation that's detoxifying, whereas in the day, you have a different set of immune responses that are keeping you more protected. So I totally geek out on this stuff. It's really cool. Similarly, your digestive system is more activated in the morning, during the midday, starts to quiet down at night, and then it's really you're in a rest and digest phase as you get into the evening where your gut is repairing. You're not actively churning your food and breaking it down. And you can go on and on and on. So how can we sort of live our lives a little bit more primed to how to sort of if you think about it, what our evolutionary expectation is. Simple things. It's really simple, like shutting your electronics down for an hour or two before you go to bed so that you're not getting exposed to blue light that suppresses your melatonin. And then if you do that, your melatonin goes up. That helps you sleep. But it also helps you detoxify your body and your brain of accumulated environmental toxins and accumulated toxins just from the breakdown of our own biochemistry that's happening all day long. So that's a big thing, is observing that rhythm.
There's a piece to that, this notion of self-awareness that you're evoking here, which is, how do I feel right now? What's going on? And, there's, to me, in my experience, there's been a certain macro that gets double clicked on when someone accepts that, because then it's like, how am I feeling right now? Well, I'm not feeling well. What is that from? Oh man, I just, I bought that muffin thing at Starbucks as I was passing through and I didn't look at the ingredients. And so for me to actually check in with how I'm feeling and be accountable for that means I now have to have personal responsibility for all of these inputs. And it's overwhelming. And so I get that a lot with the patient population in particular. It's just overwhelming. I feel like everything's poisonous, everything is stressful, I don't know where to start. So instead they just keep suffering and sliding. So I'd love to hear what wisdom you have for someone who's facing that.
Yeah, that's such a beautiful question. So one of the big principles for me is, it's also very overwhelming to be sick, and it's overwhelming to not feel well. But I think we're accustomed to that overwhelm, so we sort of sweep it under the rug and we take the next ibuprofen and we drink the next coffee or the next Red Bull. And then at night we are accustomed to the 2 glasses of wine and 2 hours of TV to wind down. So I think we're actually really overwhelmed as it is. And I really truly believe it's a pay now or pay later situation with your time and your attention. Once you learn how to make these lifestyle changes and food changes, they're quite easy. And as you have more energy and feel better and sleep better, I promise people who are watching and listening, you will be so much less overwhelmed because you'll feel great. The other thing is that, and this is particularly for women in my experience, is that when we don't feel well, we tend to be full of self-blame and self-loathing. What am I doing wrong? What can I be doing better? What shouldn't I have done? What should I do? What's wrong with me? Why is my body not working? First of all, those thought processes are exhausting. Second of all, they just activate the stress response and make us more likely to do the thing. When you're beating yourself up, you want comfort. What do you get comfort from? Well, another muffin or another glass of wine. So I think overall, my message is really, if you stay replenished by making these changes, and in the book and in my practice, I use the KISS method, which is keep it simple, sister. And, how do we just sort of make this a new lifestyle? And, thousands of women I've worked with say, yeah, it's a little bit of a learning curve, but damn, when you feel great, you don't feel overwhelmed.
Arguably, it's a hell of a lot more work being sick and not feeling well than facing the decisions, the little micro decisions you have to make to, check those inputs and all that. And it kind of aggregates. So like on your kind of tagline of your book, it's about boosting energy, clearing brain fog, healing inflammation, and losing the stubborn weight. And all of these are not kind of separate verticals. These are not separate books or separate lectures. This all falls under the same ecosystem of looking at how you address these master glands. Help me kind of understand and swim upstream here.
Yeah. So first of all, the way I picked those topics wasn't random. I actually have tens of thousands of women that follow me on Facebook and in my on my website, and of course all the women I'm interacting with in my practice and when I teach nationally. So I actually asked women, if you could pick 4 or 5 top concerns that you have, what are those? And that was really the basis for the focus of what I was going to address in the book. Because when it comes to cortisol, because it really does impact every cell in your body, and that circadian rhythm of that harmonization or synchronization of the cells with your brain, you could have picked anything. I could have picked autoimmune disease alone, or diabetes alone, or dementia alone. So I tried to pick things that most women were struggling with, so that would be the hook, right? Everybody wants to not have brain fog and be able to focus and concentrate, etc. But basically, when you are under the positive influence of cortisol, it's keeping your inflammation at bay. It's keeping your immune system really well oiled to fight infection, but not fight your own cells. It's a really good differentiator between self and other. When you have a little bit of adrenaline you're producing, as I said, you feel fabulous, right? You're excited, your brain is focused, you're on it. You feel that feeling when you're sort of like cramming for a test. It's a little bit of stress, but a little bit of exhilaration, right? That really, or you're anticipating opening a gift. What happens is and what we're meant to do is produce that in a small, steady amount, pretty much all the time, according to those rhythms, in bursts when we need it. So for example, let's say you have a toddler, or you've babysat your niece or your nephew if you don't have a toddler, and you leave a knife on the edge of the kitchen on the edge of the kitchen counter. And you, in your mind, you're thinking of this toddler as a tiny little person, but they've grown and now they get close to the knife and you're on the other side of the kitchen, and all of a sudden you're like, oh shit, they can reach that. And they're reaching it, but you realize you're too far away. It's that instant burst of energy that gets you really focused, really dialed in. It's that same kind of thing where you hear the stories of the person lifting the car off of their child to save them. It's that Hulk, and it's like that Incredible Hulk energy or Wonder Woman energy. The problem is that reaction is supposed to last for minutes to maybe a couple of hours. You think about it in the animal world as the analogy I often use is gazelles around a watering hole, and they're calmly drinking their water. They're in their pack, or herd, they're hydrating, and then a pride of lions comes up. They get tense. The gazelle's ears prick up. Their noses are flaring. Their nostrils are flaring because they're getting that scent, and that's a primitive trigger of danger for the gazelle. They run. The lions, who are also in fight or flight because they're hungry, they want to catch their meal. They catch their meal. The lions go off, they're relaxed, they're now eating their meal. And the gazelles, they're not just sitting around there freaking out, stressed out. They literally go right back to the watering hole and go back to what they were doing. So this is how this reaction is meant to be triggered and resolved. What's happening for us in our 24/7 lifestyle is that we are pretty much being triggered either chronically or constantly. So it starts out, jumping up to your alarm in the morning, having no time to take care of yourself, grabbing a quick meal or skipping your meal, as a lot of women do, starting your day with coffee not buffered by any good fat or protein, and I could kind of run through, we all know what the average American day is like until you finally fall in bed sort of unconsciously at night after a couple of hours in front of the TV and a quick check of your text messages or your Facebook page or whatever you're checking, and then you fall out only to do it the next day. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people are living for the evenings, and a lot of people are living for the weekends, but increasingly we're not even really turning off on those. And so what's happened is this survival mode that is supposed to be activated for a short time gets chronically activated and becomes too much of a good thing. Now, what happens is when you get a release of adrenaline, and a release of cortisol, they trigger a number of responses in your brain and your body. For example, energy in the form of blood flow goes away from your gut and your reproductive organs to your limbs so that you can run or fight. Your brain goes from conscious thinking, executive function in your frontal lobe, to a much more primitive, instinctive or reactive mode. You're just aware of the danger. It doesn't matter whether you have to calculate your taxes right now. You cannot think about that. And you may try and focus on that, but it ain't happening because you're just, clear and present danger. Your heart rate goes up, your blood pressure goes up, your immune system gets activated. Your awareness becomes what's called hypervigilant. You're super aware of what can go wrong, and you're constantly scanning, consciously and subconsciously, for danger. These are all really good things. Oh, one important thing is your blood sugar goes really high so that you can send a lot of sugar to your limbs to run. And you also produce a bunch of insulin at that time so that when the danger's over, the blood sugar goes back into your cells and it's not rampantly running around in your body causing inflammation and like little fires that are dangerous. No problem. That gets activated 20 minutes later or an hour later, it's resolved. Your blood pressure goes back to normal. Your heart rate goes back to normal. Your focus goes back to normal. Everything's resolved and you're okay. The problem is when you're chronically or constantly or frequently stimulating that reaction, all those good things that are supposed to make you feel good and keep you safe and alive suddenly start to backfire. So for example, cortisol is called the wear and tear hormone. Part of what it's doing is breaking down muscle over time to fuel, because if you start using up your sources of energy from your stored blood sugar or from your stored liver sugar, your body's got to get energy from somewhere. So it actually starts breaking down muscle stores. You start to jack up your blood sugar too often and jack up your insulin too often. And after a while, your pancreas is going, I don't know why. Enough. And so your pancreas starts to produce less insulin. You start to get less responsive to insulin in your cells. You develop insulin resistance, and you can develop metabolic syndrome or diabetes. One of the things that cortisol does, because it's protective against all kinds of primitive hazards that we might have faced in our evolution, is it's especially primed to react to help you conserve energy. One of the ways it does that is just like if there were going to be a famine and you were a king, you would store food in the granary. Your body does the same thing, but instead of storing grain in the granary, it stores fat around your belly. Mm-hmm. That fat is not just flubber or muffin tops. It's called visceral abdominal fat, and it's causing inflammation. But it's doing some more things than that. That's bad in itself. But it actually sends chemical messages to your brain that make sugar taste better, make processed or any kind of simple carbs taste better, and it also makes you crave them because your body's going, well, I don't know what the famine hazard is. We got to store as much energy as we can. So it makes you eat more sugar, eat more carbs, and the tasting better just makes you want them more. And it confuses your brain from knowing when you're full and when you're hungry. So you can just imagine like all the problems that come from that. Because go ahead.
So I mean, we're running out of time, and I really want to kind of unpack this a little bit more here. Is when someone's there and someone is in that kind of DEFCON 3 body crisis mode, right? It's just like, holy crap, I don't know when the warheads are going to launch. How does someone come back from that precipice and start to train the brain and the visceral fat to say, yo, it's cool, go ahead and burn this and we could go back? I mean, that seems like the place a lot of people get stuck.
Totally, and it's exactly what you said. It's telling your brain, yo, it's cool. And you have to start to, the first thing, Pedram, is that awareness, right? First of all, we have to get to the point where we can say, I'm feeling this way, and it's not really how I want to be feeling. So the first thing I ask people is, how are you feeling, and how do you want to feel? And I really have people dial into a moment in their life. It could be a moment that you're giggling with your kids. It can be a really great memory. It can be the feeling you get when you're looking at a sunset or you're in Shavasana at the end of yoga. Whatever that feeling is, when you're kind of tuned into something bigger. If they've never had that feeling, I do a breathing exercise with them to sort of bring that feeling up. And it's becoming self-aware of when you're feeling how you don't want to feel and pulling yourself back into how you do want to feel. And that just takes conscious practice. But once you start doing it, you become more and more uncomfortable feeling how you don't want to feel. And so you spend more time trying to get to how you do. And every time you do, it gets easier. So that's the first thing, is that self-awareness and asking yourself those two questions. And it's a great thing to even just sit down and write down, how do I feel? How do I want to feel? And then really make it your conscious intention in life to bridge that gap. It will not make you less effective. It will actually make you a more effective, more productive, more successful person. And so, I highly recommend taking the time to do it. The other thing is doing the basic things that we can do to reset that circadian rhythm. So waking up with the sun every day and trying to do that consistently pretty much every day of the week. Yeah, of course, if you want to sleep in on Sunday, but as long as you're generally priming yourself. And then similarly, having a wind down at night where 1 to 2 hours before you're going to bed, whatever you can really manage. And honestly, if you say, I can't do that, all I can do is 15 minutes, that's cool. Start with 15 minutes because you're going to love how you feel so much that you're going to want to extend it. But go to bed at the same time every night and be really committed to an intentional wind down. Reading a real book, not just a Kindle, but a real book in your hands with real pages, in bed, dim lights on in your room, have a bath even or shower before you do that. And then just 2 to 3 minutes of breathing right before you go to sleep. It can reset your cortisol and start to get your brain out of that I love that DEFCON 3, like that mode that you're in that wears the fire. The other thing is that you can start to train your brain to rethink negative pathways. It's really interesting because when you get stuck in that DEFCON mode, you're actually looking for danger. So your outlook on life can get really crappy. You can start to think, oh, everyone else is having good luck and I'm not. Everything bad always happens to me. But you're actually living in what's called a negativity bias. And starting to learn to shift that by saying, well, okay, where's the evidence for that? Like every time you have one of those thoughts, start to become conscious of those thoughts and tell your brain it's just a thought, because then you're starting to shift into safety mode. In the book, I talk about some other things too, because, it's not just our thoughts and our lifestyle, it's the environmental toxins that are triggering cortisol because it's trying to keep up with inflammation. It's food triggers that, each one of us may have a different food trigger. There are some big common ones, but I walk everyone through a really accessible blueprint for shifting these triggers so that we can actually sort of like feel how we want to feel again and have a sense of, a lot of my patients say to me, Dr. Romm, I just want to feel like myself again. And I think we all know what that means for ourselves. And I think that is that feeling of how we want to feel.
Yeah, amen to that. So the book is called The Adrenal Thyroid Revolution, Dr. Aviva Romm. Out now, available now. Yeah. Great read, lots of practical, very, very beautiful. By the way, you have like colors in there. That's gourmet. It's a beautiful print, and it is useful information for you. Right? This is about you understanding you and you being able to get into why you feel the way you do, and then having expert advice from our beloved doctor who is walking you along this path. So check out the book. Let me know what you think. And it's available everywhere books are sold. I'm assuming it's a big imprint, so Harper One.
Absolutely. And also, one of the things I've really learned is doing things in community just amplifies the power of what we're doing and makes us more likely to stick with our plans and just have that sort of support. So for folks who want to, you can buy the book anywhere. When you buy the book, head over to avivaromm.com/book bonus. There's actually a place to put your receipt information, and that gets you into a whole private Facebook community that's amazing. It's me in there, my team, which is my healthcare team, and a few thousand women who are jamming with each other and supporting each other in making sustainable changes and feeling great.
Yeah, and it's spelled AVIVAROMM, so double M.com, just so you don't end up in the wrong neighborhood. Yep. Wonderful. Aviva, congratulations. I know how much work it is to get a book out. It's like having another baby. And so, you got a beautiful baby out here, and it's helping. I already know it's helping tens of thousands of people. So keep up the good work. Thank you for being on this show, and let me know what you think. I mean, listen, stress is a big deal. Knowing the fallout from stress, knowing the fallout from the crazy lifestyles we live. I mean, we talk about that every week in the academy. This is part of what we're talking about. This is the scientific basis of what's happening inside of our cells. And the moral of the story is swim upstream, learn how to meditate, learn how to understand where this is coming from. More focused awareness and basically better curation of what the inputs are in your body. I mean, this is wonderful. I love it. I love it when there's a guest I can agree with everything she says. It makes my life even that much easier. So I'll see you next time.
Thank you.
And thanks for being here.